Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. We are waiting 2 more minutes and then we will start.
Hello, I'm Samuel from Cameroon.
Hi, Samuel. Thank you very much for joining. Hi. Good afternoon. Okay, 1 more minute and we'll kick off.
Hello? Hello?
Hello. We hear you very well. Please, if you can put your microphone off. Why?
Hi. Sorry, can you mute your microphone? Yeah. Nakita, if you can please come here and mute them. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah?
Okay, so I think we could start. Nakita, is that okay? Can we?
Yes, I think we can start. And hi, everyone. I see many countries gathered, so I will leave the floor to Lucia, who is the general moderator.
Thank you very much, Nakita. So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And thank you very much for connecting from such different regions and time zones. We really appreciate it. Welcome to the first youth consultation that we are organized together with the UN Youth Office and the World Food Forum of FAO. My name is Lucia Graf, and I'm Portfolio Knowledge Management Associate in the Youth Focal Point of the Local 2030 Coalition Secretariat. And I will be, as Nakita mentioned, the overall moderator of this youth consultation. The Local 2030 Coalition is the UN platform to advance the localization of the SDGs. And to give you a bit of context of why we are here, this youth consultation is part of a broader engagement strategy of the coalition called Road to Seville, the Local Way, which is a multi-level and multi-stakeholder process leading to FFD4, the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development. The coalition, also to give you a bit of background on on this platform brings together its 5 constituencies, which are youth, civil society and academia, national governments, local and regional governments, and private sector, to ensure they indeed have voices in the global processes. And today we are putting youth voices at the center of our conversation. And with FFD4 as one of the key milestones coming our way, this youth consultation is truly very important to us. So therefore, we will compile key recommendations on youth-led localized finance that will be shared with the facilitators of the intergovernmental negotiations leading to FFD4, and still to be confirmed, but it will most likely be promoted in a side event during FFD4 to foster and strengthen localized finance. Happy to share, colleagues, that we've reached the maximum capacity of Zoom with over 500 registrations. So thank you very much for the outreach you've done and for supporting the consultation. I'm gonna quickly let you know the housekeeping rules. We'll start with an opening remarks, followed by a setting the scene to frame why youth engagement in local finance is crucial to achieve the SDGs. And after that, we'll move directly to the consultation, which will be an open space for the voluntary presentation of recommendations and best practices of financing mechanism for youth, with a dedicated segment to Q&A and interaction with all the participants. And I invite you all to start adding the questions you have throughout this session, but of course, keeping in mind that we will have a space, an interactive space for this after the consultation. That will be also followed by a keynote listener by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, EU and Cooperation of Spain, who will react on this consultation. And the session will be closed by the head of the Local 2030 Secretariat. And also to let you know that we will be recording the consultation for note-taking purposes. So I hope you are fine with it. Yeah, so without further ado, I'm very honored to welcome our co-organizers, the UN Youth Office and the World Food Forum, as well as the steering committee of the Local 2030 Coalition, Nakita, to deliver brief opening remarks. And we will start by playing video remarks from Felipe Pulier, who is the Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs of the UN Youth Office, that unfortunately couldn't make it today, but made huge efforts to be present through a video. So yeah, Nakita, if you can play the video, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Lucia. So now I will play the video, as Lucia mentioned, of ISG Felipe Polier, who is the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations for Youth Affairs. So just a second to share my screen. Okay.
We cannot hear it, Nakita. Nakita, can you hear me?
No sound, madam.
Yeah, we cannot hear the video.
You can't hear the video?
No.
Okay.
Just
Nakita, can I share my screen maybe? Is that okay?
And now can you hear the video?
no sound, madam.
No.
No.
No,
Nakita,
not audible.
Okay,
let me
okay.
No.
Okay.
There is still no
Okay.
sound of the video.
Not audible.
Not audible.
Not audible.
Okay, Lucia will share the video. Lucia will share the video. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Felipe Polier and I'm the Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs, leading the United Nations Youth Office, an office established by a General Assembly mandate to advance youth affairs. Thank you for joining the road to Seville, the local way, a youth consultation on local financing solutions towards the 4th Financing for Development Conference. I thank Local2030, the World Food Forum, and my team at the United Nations Youth Office for creating and convening this important discussion. It's no secret that today's global context is deeply challenging, marked by compounding crises that include conflicts, gender inequalities, and climate change. The truth is that 5 years from 2030, we are far from delivering on the promises of the Sustainable Development Goals. Young people are particularly affected. Hello everyone, my name is Felipe. Young women are particularly affected. Mental health is another serious concern, with suicide being the 4th leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds. To address these and other issues, adequate financing is essential. Financing is the engine that drives development. Yet, the world faces a stark financing divide and shrinking fiscal space. In fact, the SDG financing gap, an estimated 4 trillion shortfall in annual investment, has never been so large. Despite these challenges, young people are at the front lines of creating positive change. From advocating for social justice and equality to designing innovative solutions for the SDGs, young people are leading the way in every country, city, and village around the world. I truly believe that the smartest decision we can make to address current crises and avoid future ones is to invest in young people. Part of that work includes breaking down the barriers preventing access to finance for young people and youth-led organizations, which directly prevent them from sustaining and scaling their impact. Local and grassroots youth organizations are particularly affected. Beyond financial barriers, young people who are among the most affected by policy decisions are also the most marginalized in decision-making spaces, including discussions on financing priorities. This exclusion reinforces the misconception that youth and their organizations are merely beneficiaries rather than equal partners in driving change. This needs to change. The good news is that with world leaders coming together to take action to deliver an SDG investment push at FFD4 in Seville, we have a unique opportunity to transform this reality. Young people's views, recommendations, and meaningful participation in policy making at all levels must be at the heart of this process. We must seize this window of opportunity and use it to translate commitments into concrete action and tangible impact on people and the planet. You can count on the United Nations Youth Office to be a committed partner in this process. If we work with and for young people, we can build the worlds we envision in the 2030 agenda. I wish you great discussions ahead and look forward to the outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and so sorry for not being able to play the video. At least we can hear the message from the ESG for Youth Affairs. And I'm now very happy to share to give the word to Nakita Boya, who is the youth representative of the Local 2030 Coalition Steering Committee. She's also a PhD student at La Sapienza University, and the leader of this youth consultation. So thank you very much, Nakita. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lucia, and thank you very much all for joining us. It is a true pleasure and deep honor to open today's youth consultation on the road to the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. In my role as the youth representative to the UN Local2030 Steering Committee and the lead of these consultations, I've seen firsthand the passion, the creativity, and the resilience that young people bring to the conversation. Today, for example, we've reached the maximum capacity with over 500 participants joining us from all regions of the world and across sectors. This in itself is a powerful message that young people deeply care about how resources are mobilized, distributed, and made accessible. We are here to talk about local finance, and we need to understand how it impacts different people at different levels. Yet, youth-led initiatives often remain underfunded, overlooked, and under-recognized, despite being at the front line of innovation, inclusion, and resilience. These consultations are about changing that narrative together. That will help shape the FFD4 agenda and beyond. This space wouldn't be possible without our incredible partners that I deeply want to thank and congratulate. The UN Office, the FAO World Food Forum, the Local2030 Coalition, and the World Bank Youth Summit. Thanks so much for not only supporting this process, but for placing your trust in youth to lead it. Thank you again for joining us. Your voices matter and your ideas can move systems. Thank you, Lucia, for giving me the floor, and now I will give it back to you.
Thank you very much, Nakita, and I like to echo your words, and thanks again, all your efforts you've put together to make this consultation happen, as well as the UN Youth Office, and of course the FAO's World Food Forum. And now we're gonna give the word to Victor Muiru, who's the head of local youth action at the UN FAO's World Food Forum. Victor, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Lucia, for this opportunity. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who are joining us from every corner of the globe for this very special youth consultation in the lead up to the 4th Financing for Development Conference, FFD4, later this year in Seville, Spain. So for those who are meeting for the very first time, I know quite a number of you, but for those who are meeting for the very first time, my name is Victor Mugomwiru, and I serve as the head of local youth action within the World Food Forum's Global Youth Action at the Office of Youth and Women of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So that's a mouthful, FAO. So let me just start by expressing my gratitude for this opportunity to reflect on two themes that I think are very, very deeply close to my heart. So one of it is the localization of finance, and not just finance for development, as well as the localization of youth empowerment. And so on one hand, in the face of the rapidly closing window to rescue the SDGs, through scaled up investments, I have undertaken some academic research on really how we can bridge a very persistent gap, the evidence and understanding surrounding blended finance. And so once blended finance was considered this approach that would shift development funding from just billions to trillions. And so that will help unlock the vast reserves of private capital held within institutions and held within households. And now blended finance really faces a lot of real world hesitations. And it has not materialized to what it really was meant to accomplish. So it has not yet fulfilled its potential. But beyond this research that I have undertaken, my day-to-day work is grounded on the more practical side of localizing youth engagement and youth empowerment. And at the FAO Office of Youth and Women, we run a number of global programs, from advocacy programs to innovation programs to education programs, and also using culture as a catalyst for young people's engagement. But through all of these things, one thing has become very, very clear, that we need to move from thinking global and need to start acting local. And that's why the World Food Forum has really started to adapt its global youth programs to local realities, putting local youth in the driver's seat to really develop context-specific solutions tailored to the unique agri-food systems challenges. But you might wonder and ask yourself, why does this matter? The reason is the challenges that we are facing as a globe are very global, but sometimes they are shaped by local realities, shaped by economic, social, geographical, political factors. And so that's why localization of the SDGs, localization of youth empowerment is really crucial. And in our own case, we think that to be effective, we need to have interventions that are anchored in the lived experiences, in the lived priorities, in the aspirations of people who know them best. And in most cases, these are local youth. And so we are working towards setting up World Food Forum national youth chapters, which are building uniquely unifying platforms at the country level, really to bridge fragmented youth efforts, to foster more stronger partnerships among young people, and to enable young people, to empower them to meaningfully transform their agri-food systems from the ground up, from the local level, building to the national level, and then building to the global level. And now, based on these two aspects, this localization of development finance and the localization of youth empowerment and engagement, I would like to offer just a few recommendations that will maybe kickstart the session and also set the scene for the next sessions that are coming. And one of the recommendations is we are better off together than apart. And so we need to come together in such a way that we build coalitions over competition. So in a world where the financing of youth-led and community-based initiatives remains painfully meager, fragmentation is very, very inefficient. And actually, once we are fragmented, it's really a disservice to the communities that we want to engage in. And now has never been a better time for us, especially in the context of the geopolitical landscape and changing financing landscape that is now changing more than ever, changing now even more than it was during the times of the COVID pandemic. It is time now to come in investing in the creation of unifying platforms that foster a culture of collaboration and competition. And so that's why I think the UN Local 2030 Secretariat is doing an incredible job in just enabling that we can be able to localize the SDGs. And from our end, we are working to localize youth engagement within the agri-food systems sector. And so with World Food Forum national youth chapters, we are pulling together strengths, we are mobilizing more resources and multiplying the collective impact more than we could have done just by being alone. And so with this, we need to set our egos and logos aside. We need to join hands. We need to join hands not only across ourselves, but also across sectors, across regions, and then so that we can be able to bring results. And again, so as I mentioned, we really need to come together, especially in the context of the painfully meager global financing landscape that we are facing. The second thing that we need to do as we are localizing finance as well as localizing youth empowerment is to set aside some patient capital, some seed capital to resource the transition. And right now, especially in this landscape, we see a big push for organizations for just to think about domestic resources in their own localities that they can be able to tap into. But we know that there's a critical gap in this. And so many of the youth-led initiatives, many of the community-driven initiatives, many of the organizations are still in their very early and fragile stages. And so because of this, we cannot expect them to start tapping into these domestic resources without first enabling patient seed capital. And so we need to be very flexible in the resources that we do provide to young people, to organizations as they localize, and as they also look for local resources. And so we must back our ambition for transitioning to localized financing with patient capital that can now also start to become catalytic. So the second thing that I wanted to say is patient seed capital that can be able to resource the transition for us to tap into domestic resources. The third thing that I think will be crucial for us is to ensure that we have institutional capacity, that the organizations that are working at the local level and that can be able to tap into this sort of localized financing have the sort of institutional capacity to enable them to have the skills, to have the systems, and to have the support that is needed for them to scale and sustain their impact. So localization does not mean that we step back. It means that we start leaning in. It means that we start strengthening the institutional muscles of our youth-led organizations, in general, so that their local-led efforts can now stop being very short-lived. They can start being long-lasting. And so we need to really, really work on strengthening this institutional muscle. And lastly, as I head to the last point, we need to focus on the lessons that we have already learned. And I know across the globe, there's quite a number of lessons of countries, of organizations, some case studies on how we can be able to localize finance and empower young people. And now is the right time for us to share these replicable models, to share them widely, and then adapt them contextually, depending on where we are. And once we have something that works in one place, I think it will be really good for us to start inspiring others to look at these models and to contextually look at them and adapt them to their own situation, and also to see how these lessons can influence the global change. And I said lastly, but now lastly, we need to rethink our global financing architecture. And there have been quite a number of innovative financing models that have been proposed, including blended finance, as I mentioned. And for example, blended finance was supposed to move us from billions to trillions. And this innovative financing model has really largely remained unfulfilled. And so we cannot afford to abandon such innovation. The thing we need to do right now is to rethink our global financial architecture, to develop new instruments, to think about empowering new intermediaries, and aligning this with new incentives. And so because of this, then we need to be very bold. We need to start this sort of rethinking, this recalibrating, this sort of changing our global financing architecture so that we can have a fit-for-purpose architecture that really unlocks financing needed to deliver the SDGs. And in our case, especially eliminate malnutrition and hunger, which is quite rife at the moment. And I don't think there's a better time to do this than at the FFD conference that will be taking place in June, if I'm not wrong, in Seville, Spain. And I think this consultation is also one of the processes that can also help to transform this reimagination, realignment of our global financing architecture. And so with this, I wish you all the best and look forward to the great discussions that we are going to have. So thank you so much to the UN Youth Office and to the Assistant General, and also to the UN Local2030 Secretariat, to the organizers of this, especially the youth leading this, Nakita, and to generally the World Bank Youth Summit that has also joined. So thank you so much to each and every one of you, and look forward to what the outcomes of this session will. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Victor. Thanks a lot for your speech, your recommendations, and all the work you're doing together at the Local Youth Action, which I had the chance to read one of the national chapters you're working on, and I was really impressed. So congratulations on that, and really personally very happy to work with you. So yeah, now that we've heard from the co-organizers, and I'd like to thank them again for all the work they're putting together, we can move on to framing the discussion. So in this next segment, the Setting the Scene, we will explore the role of youth in local finance and the SDGs in different regions. We will delve into why youth participation in local finance is essential for advancing the SDGs and what's holding us back. Our first speaker in this segment is Marco Fayet, who's the Deputy Manager of the World Bank Youth Summit in Washington. Marco, over to you. The floor is yours, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you for the opportunity to engage in this consultation. My name is Marco Fayet. I'm French and Nigerian, and I'm the Deputy Manager for the World Bank Group Youth Summit. I'd like to start by emphasizing that for youth to achieve their full potential and to lead a life of dignity and opportunity, they have to be actively engaged in all the spheres of life, including economic activity. I think we tend to romanticize youth entrepreneurship. Sometimes it's not a choice, but also a necessity because of a wide array of challenges. And I'd like to help set the stage by going over some of those challenges when it comes to resource distribution and mobilization, and then by showcasing some solutions that we have found to be particularly effective. So in terms of the challenges, the first one that comes to mind personally is financial literacy. Basic concepts: how do you save? How do you budget? What does inflation mean? How can capital work for you? Oftentimes, those are concepts that people have to teach themselves later in life, and they should be taught as early as possible for individual benefit as well as societal benefit. Physical infrastructure is another recurring challenge, whether we're talking about actual banks or digital public infrastructure, cell phone towers, optic fiber cables. A lot of the times we find this infrastructure to be lacking in many places in the world. On the supply side, we have a lack of available capital. And even when this capital is available, there's often a lack of trust in youth-led initiatives. I think there's a general underappreciation for the potential of young people. And it will be harder for them to get funding, especially at interest rates that are not incredibly high. There's a lot of gaps for underserved communities in general, whether we're talking about gender inequality, rural communities, undocumented migrants, people in settings affected by fragility, conflict, and violence. There's an unequal opportunity landscape that needs to be addressed. There's often a suboptimal regulatory landscape as well, which is very political, but it exists. And finally, there is a limited amount of formal job opportunities, especially that are aligned with the aspirations of young people. One of the points that the World Bank Group is highlighting at the moment, we're in the middle of our spring meetings, is that there are 1.2 billion people who are coming onto the job market in the next 15 years. Most of them are from emerging countries. And at the moment, we expect 420 million jobs to be waiting for them. So there's a huge gap that needs to be closed. This is a challenge that the World Bank Group is committed to tackle in order to ensure that society can benefit from what we call a demographic dividend and avoid a social catastrophe. So this is a bit of a bleak picture, but then I'll now move on to the solutions that we have found to be effective in many parts of the world. One bucket of programs we like to call multifaceted economic inclusion programs. So those are programs that don't just have one single focus, but that have a range of arms, a range of angles. So those can be, for example, cash transfers, It can be psychosocial trainings, public work programs, so governments providing working opportunities for poor people. You build roads and then you get paid for it. Apprenticeship programs, business mentoring, and digital upskilling. So closing the digital gap and making sure that, for example, AI empowers everybody and not just a select few. We found that combining those initiatives, they typically bring about increased savings, women empowerment, improved climate resilience, improved agricultural productivity, and just generally speaking, economic growth that trickles down to a range of outcomes, for example, related to education and health, and that importantly are also persistent over time. So you don't want to just focus on one thing, you want to kind of see the broader picture and come at it from multiple angles. The second important point that I'd like to highlight is this idea of localization. So top-down solutions from HQ are often a good starting point, whether we're talking about the World Bank or the UN. If you sit in HQ, you will get information, data points from all over the world, and you can kind of see, okay, this seems to be working everywhere. But it's not enough. We find that we often have to not just collect information from everywhere and pick out what has a higher success rate, but then also tailor it and adapt it to the local context. You're going to be dealing with different people, with different political environments, with different climate environments. And so solutions that are designed with the local reality in mind, they tend to be way more effective, way more efficient, and longer lasting in time. There's also this idea of engaging the local communities. If people are sitting in a village somewhere and someone from HQ comes around and says, you should do this, and then leaves 2 weeks later, this is a lot less effective than if you empower local people. If they themselves have agency, they're the first ones to have a stake in their community. So it's important to engage with local actors on the ground, and especially young people. So the World Bank and the Youth Summit, of which I'm part of, we're committed to local solutions. We're committed to people-centered approaches. We work all over the world in 170 countries. And what we have found is that the biggest wins come from partnering. So we like to work with civil society, with academia, with the private sector, with governments, with NGOs, with other international organizations. Development in general requires a comprehensive approach. You can't just focus on education or health or agriculture. You have to have a systemic way of thinking to ensure that there are no bottlenecks that will then make the entire system ineffective. I like what Victor said previously about us being better off working together as opposed to apart, and the need to set egos and logos aside. I might reuse this. But I definitely echo his call to come together and to build coalitions. I think multilateralism also implies a multi-generational approach to tackling issues. It's not just old people versus young people. I think we have to think about society as a whole. And one of the important points that I particularly resonate with is recognizing young people as agents of change. So not just as beneficiary. Young people are hungry for change. They sit at the frontier of innovation. They want to see things move. They are the first concerned by all of the challenges that we keep talking about, whether it's climate change or jobs or security issues. And they're also at the forefront of successful development and social cohesion. Even though they are the most affected by the policy decisions that are taken, they're also the most marginalized in this decision-making process. So we will keep pushing to systematically include youth in those processes, not just as beneficiaries, but as full-fledged stakeholders with agency that can shape community, and with a voice that should be listened to. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marco. Thanks a lot for sharing these examples and best practices that the World Bank Group is putting together. It's very impressive. And I like to also echo the need to tailor and adapt solutions to local context and local realities, as you mentioned, and the importance of effective partnerships for advancing the SDGs and having young people as part of these partnerships, of course. Thank you very much again and for joining, and we can continue the conversation later in the discussion that we have after the consultation. And now I'd like to give the word to Vincent Senyondo, who is a monitoring and evaluation specialist at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development in Uganda. Vincent, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, the moderators, everyone, the coordinator, the Ministry of Finance. So fellow leaders and partners from the UN fraternity and also the Friends of Development. First of all, I bring you greetings from Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, where the youth are not only the majority, but also the hope. When I received the invitation to speak at this forum, I paused and reflected. What does it truly mean to be young in a world grappling with the distress, climate urgency, food insecurity, and shrinking civic space? Okay, and how do we young people finance a future that we do believe in? From the SDGs perspective, sustainable development means making progress that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future to meet their own needs. In simpler terms, this means ensuring that today's choices, how we live, how we build, consume, and invest, do not rob our children and grandchildren of the chance to also thrive. It means that we must put quality education for today's learners while protecting forests so that tomorrow's children will breathe clean air. It means ensuring access to health care now, while also tackling climate change so that our rural farmers 7 to 8 years from now can still plant and harvest with certainty. It means feeding our communities today without poisoning the rivers that future generations will also drink from. In essence, sustaining development is about doing the right thing now and making sure that our progress today leaves behind a legacy, but not a liability. This sounds like a noble cause, doesn't it? But there is an uncomfortable question, which I want to pose to you. How can the young people think about preserving the future when they're not even assured of their next meal today? This is not simply theory. This is real. In Uganda, where I come from, over 75% of the population is under the age of 30, and half of the population is under 18 years. We are among the youngest population in the world, with a median age of 16.3 years, and yet unemployment rate among the youth is over 64%, and 45% and 41% of the youth are regarded as not in employment, not in education, or training. Many youth are job seekers, not by choice, but by systemic exclusion from the economic opportunities. Having laid that background, allow me to share with you only 3 reflections and 1 call to action. First, why is youth engagement in local finance crucial to achieving the SDGs? We must first understand that youth and local finance is the missing link in achieving the SDGs. Sustainable development goals cannot be achieved in boardrooms alone. The SDGs must be lived, implemented, and financed locally, where real times unfold, and the young people are the ones living this reality every day. Whether it's climate action, zero hunger, or quality education, youth are both the implementers and also the beneficiaries. Yet, when you look at financing models, look at the budgets, the grants, and investments, youth voices are often absent. and our priorities are underfunded. We are always told, wait for your turn. But the truth is, we are not the leaders of tomorrow anymore. We are the workforce. We are the voters, the innovators of today. Local finance must reflect this in its entirety. Secondly, what are the key barriers young people face in accessing finance and investment opportunities? Let's talk about real hurdles. In Uganda and across Africa, youth face several challenges and barriers accessing finance. These include barriers such as collateral challenges. Young people don't own land or traditional assets to secure loans. High interest rates. Youth loans, when available, are often too costly to be viable. Talk of the institutional distrust. Financial institutions perceive youth as high risk and often deny them credit. Talk about untailored financial products. There's often a mismatch between what young people need and what the market offers. How can we then build a sustainable future if we are locked out of financial systems? This exclusion is not just a moral injustice, it's an economic mistake, because youth are not just dreamers, we are doers. But here is the beauty of the youth, which is resilience. In the face of exclusions, we are creating solutions that are bold, grassroots-led, and also scalable. Thirdly, how do youth-led solutions contribute to financial sustainability and inclusion? Despite the several challenges mentioned, we are not waiting to be rescued. We are building our own ladders through solutions. And these include, we have the Village Savings and Loan Association, the VSLAs. In Uganda, we have digital platforms like in Seville, where young people are forming mobile saving groups and accessing microloans with no need for banks. Talk about the youth agricultural cooperatives, from coffee, where Uganda is among the top producers in the world, to cassava, cocoa. Young farmers are leading cooperatives supported by some government initiative like Emyoga, and the youth are now leading the food security agenda on the continent. Talk about the innovation hubs and startup financing. The tech-savvy youth are building financial inclusion tools through hubs like the Innovation Village, which have in the country, transforming both ideas into investable ventures. I want to speak more about the circles and investment clubs, where both in urban and rural areas, young people are leveraging social capital to challenge the traditional definitions of being credit worth. Maybe I'll speak to one more, which is about, in Uganda, we have what you call the movable property financing, the simple RGS, which is the security interest in movable property systems. Here, youth can now use their movable assets like motorcycles, sewing machines, smartphones as collateral. And already over 5,000 loans have been unlocked through this game-changing platform. These aren't theories, they are working models. What we need to do is simply to scale them up now. In conclusion, another call to action. I call upon the UN fraternity, global financiers, and all of us in this engagement. Let us move from promise to platforms. Let us reimagine financing models that do not trickle down, but rise from below. Let us go beyond consultations and establish co-creation spaces where youth set the agenda. We are not the leaders of tomorrow. We are leading today. Let Seville be the moment to say, we didn't just listen to the youth. We financed their vision rooted in local realities. So today, I leave you with this. Do not fund projects. fund potential. Don't just listen to the youth. Trust us. Don't just talk about the future, finance the present. Because when you finance the youth, you fund the future for God and my country and for a world where youth rise as builders of a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. It was a very interesting speech. Thank you for sharing Uganda's reality that, as you mentioned, is not an easy one, being one of the youngest population in the world and the challenges that entails in your country. And as you well mentioned, this is something that I like to recall. Young people are not the leaders of tomorrow. They are the workforce of today. And therefore, they need adequate opportunities, support, finance, and they need to be part of these policies. And indeed, we need to start moving from problems to platform and develop co-creation spaces where young people can also be represented. So thank you very much for your intervention, Vincent, and for being with us today. And I like now I'll move to Ana Erika Larenza as the last speaker of this Setting the Scene segment. She's the chair of EVA Youth Global Network. And I'd like to give the floor to her. Thank you very much for joining us today, Ana. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. I hope you all can hear me well. And I would like to, of course, thank the organizers, the Local 2030 Coalition Secretariat, the UN Youth Office, FAO World Food Forum for having me here today. Before I begin my speech, I would just like everyone to just imagine a very simple image. Doors. So young people worldwide possess incredible creativity and drive. And in my work in EVA Youth and in engaging and working with so many young people around the world, I have seen that if you give them doors of opportunities, they will run towards them. They will open them all if they can. And if they cannot access those doors, they will break barriers and do their best to access them. And if there are no doors, best believe that they will build one on their own. My name is Ana Erika Lareza. I am from Philippines. I am the chair of EVA Youth Global Network, and it's an organization essentially dedicated for empowering young people in the field of research throughout all of its processes, most especially in evaluation. So for several years now, I have been volunteering with other young people advocating for our generation in many global stage. And today, I want to share an insight which other speakers have already highlighted. And it's essentially that the path to achieving 2 SDGs is really deeply tied to the empowerment of young people, which in most cases hinges on access and control over local finance. So with the limited time that I have, I wish to build on what my colleagues have already shared regarding the barriers for young people. But I want to emphasize a particular challenge that I hope everyone within this consultation will keep in mind and keep very close to the heart. And that is already the evolving nature of youth engagement in itself. And that in itself also demanding a fundamental shift on how we engage young people, which essentially calls for a shift on how we share power. Now, how that will connect to local financing, and I hope to illustrate that further with you all as I go through my speech. So I want everyone to keep in mind that the development sector as a whole have monetary resources. But young people, on the other hand, possesses something, what I would argue, something much more valuable, and that is time. That is a precious and finite resource that they are willing to invest in causes they believe in and in solutions that they are passionate about. And I am not speaking in abstract terms. This is something that also comes from personal experience. I am serving as a chair of EVA Youth on a voluntary basis. To make ends meet, I have 2 working jobs. I'm also pursuing my master's degree, and add to the fact that I am a young Asian woman, where the society and culture constantly pressures me to focus on family, getting married, building family, providing for parents, so on and so forth. So best believe when I say that with the little time that I have at the end of the day, in between sleeping and eating, and to a certain degree sacrificing my social life, I need to ensure that my time is well spent. And I'm not alone in that. I'm pretty sure. Raise your hand or react if you also feel the same, that young people everywhere faces the same similar pressures and make similar calculations. So at the end of that, we come to a conclusion that tokenistic participation is definitely obsolete. So we must ask, how can we make this, our programs, our consultations, our initiatives, truly worthy of young people's time? How do we design our work to respect their expertise, to value their contributions, and empower them to lead? We need to step up and ensure that we are worthy of their investment. So keep in mind that kind of flip on investment as well. And again, it reminds us of that fundamental shift that we need to do, the willingness to relinquish the control and commit to genuine collaboration. As others have already highlighted, young people are not just beneficiaries of development, they are its most valuable asset. They bring innovation and creativity. They drive sustainable and inclusive development. They build more resilient and equitable communities. So the role of not only EVAL Youth, but for any organization that seeks to empower young people is clear. That's to create space, provide the tools and the skills, and foster networks for them to thrive. So allow me to illustrate this further with EVAL Youth's own story, and perhaps also being able to tie it up to local financing. EVAL Youth was conceptualized essentially to address a global issue. Within the field of evaluation, there's a lack of mechanisms for young people to build their skills to become competent in the field. If there's such opportunity exists, it's often in developed countries, and it's behind high, very, very high tuition fees. As a young person, we all know that's almost impossible to access. And in many countries, they don't even exist at all. To contextualize further, on the other hand, EVAL Youth is blessed to have a really good enabling environment. We have supportive partners where they give young people complete autonomy and control over resources. That includes financial resources to implement their initiatives. So EVAL Youth, with its meager budget, but with high level of empowerment and autonomy and control, how did they address this global challenge? First of all, one example, they tried to develop a global mentoring program, matched seasoned experts with young professionals, providing invaluable guidance and support to develop careers in evaluation. Modest initiative for sure, but it developed a global culture of learning, mentorship, and knowledge sharing in the field. And it's a culture that I personally can attest, because it's how I was introduced into the field. My own mentor shared not only their technical experience and knowledge, but also their networks, know-how, skills, shaping my career. And then another one is virtual conferences. And please take note, this is before COVID-19. Prior to COVID-19, they pioneered in the field the use of virtual conferences to provide young people across the borders and time zones access to cutting-edge knowledge, skills, and emerging trends within the field. And they did so with simultaneous translation to multiple languages, Russian, Spanish, English, French, Portuguese, and Arabic, all completely free of charge. But perhaps one of the most compelling experiences that I've had with regards to, financing young people is when I got involved in developing a program for funding initiatives focused on engaging and empowering indigenous communities in evaluation and research processes. To contextualize again, if you do not know, in Asian countries, especially indigenous communities, they are heavily centered upon the decisions of the community elders. Young people have no say in it. So with that in mind, one application stood out, and it came from an indigenous youth with a simple project integrating young people within her community's decision-making process. And it's so profound with such meager budget as well. Like the project challenged deeply entrenched norms and cultural traditions. With limited resources and with just this one person, it empowered the community of indigenous youth to organize, to strategize, not only to reclaim and preserve their history and culture, but then also gain voice and platform to shape their community and their future. So, my friends, the stories I've shared highlight just one truth, that to truly empower young people, we must share their power. And in this world, money means power. Giving young people roles, leadership positions, it's important for sure, but it can be a bit tokenistic sometimes. True empowerment, as I've mentioned by my colleagues who spoke ahead of me, means putting them in the driver's seat, giving them the tools to build their own doors. We need structures, as explained earlier as well, that allow young people themselves to mobilize resources and create change in their own terms, with direct access to local finance to design and implement their own solutions. So I urged everyone here in this consultation and later on at FFD4 and beyond, keep in mind this question: how can we ensure local finance empowers young people, not just as beneficiaries, but as decision makers and drivers of their own destinies? How do we shift from control using the finances, but to genuine collaboration? Young people have the agency to determine how these resources are mobilized. To be honest, inviting and engaging young people is easy. They have the creativity, their passion, and they drive to deliver a just and sustainable world. But obviously, we all know as young people, we cannot act alone. The true challenge lies in how development leaders, policy makers, financial institutions abandon outdated mentalities and approaches. The challenge lies in how we need to create a model of shared power where young people can truly lead. Because in that empowerment, in most cases, begins with financial resources. So to conclude my speech, I just want to remind everyone of the doors. Let's open those doors. Let's remove barriers and ensure that when young people walk through those doors, they have adequate resources and autonomy to lead the way. So thank you so much. Over to you, Lucia.
Thank you very much, Anna-Erika, for your words and for sharing the work you are doing at the Eval Youth. And of course, for this, the super visual example of the doors, which I fully agree with. And thanks for highlighting the challenge of the evolving nature of youth engagement, which indeed demands a shift on how we engage with young people, how we communicate with them, and the importance of empowering them, not only as beneficiaries, but to have these structures, no, where we can allow young people to mobilize resources. Thank you very much for your speech. And with this, we are finalizing the setting the scene segment. We are ready to move to the most interactive part of today's session, which is the youth consultation, that, as I mentioned, is this open space for the voluntary presentations of recommendations, best practices, and innovative financing mechanisms for youth. and Nakita, the youth representative of the steering committee of the Local2030 Coalition and the leader of this youth consultation, will be moderating. So Nakita, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. And I want to mention that Lucia has been very key and pivotal to these consultations too. So thank you so much for your involvement. And thank you very much for all the previous speakers. We are already receiving questions. So stay with us because you will have some questions during the Q&A. So now we enter the second segment of these consultations. That will be about the consultation, the open space for the voluntary presentation of recommendations, best practices, and innovative financial mechanism for youth. We have a broad panel. We have UNDESA, the private sector, academia, but now I will start introducing Afroza Tanzi. And Afroza Tanzi is a social entrepreneur and development practitioner from Bangladesh. She serves as the CEO of Protiba, which is an initiative dedicated to empowering marginalized women through financial literacy and capacity building. We've talked about financial literacy, how it can be a huge challenge in accessing finance, but then I will let Afroza talk more about her work and her recommendation. Afroza, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nakita. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I have two devices connected. There's internet problem in my area. Hi, everyone. My name is Tanzi, and I'm a social entrepreneur, as Nakita said. There will be so much more to say about myself and my experiences, but it's very difficult to talk after so many great speakers has already spoken, and it pretty much already has covered everything that I wanted to say. So maybe a little differently, I'll talk about what I think from my experience. What are the innovative financing mechanism for youth worked for me in my whole experience. So I'm Afroza Tanzi. I'm a youth engagement officer currently working as a consultant for UNDP Bangladesh. I'm a social entrepreneur, which is my main identity. I work with women in the intersection of healthcare and financial literacy. And I'm also a development practitioner. So just like the previous speaker was saying, we have two jobs to juggle between, and then still trying to provide for the family and still to feed the passion for youth. Yeah, I'm doing that too. So from my perspective of Bangladesh, I always think it's just the numbers from Bangladesh, but I'm pretty sure everyone in this room today would be able to connect to these numbers, and somehow it's really relevant. In Bangladesh, it's 47.6 million population, which is almost 2/3 of the population, and the unemployment rate of this population is 12%, which is higher than the national average. So this is exactly why we really need financing, and we just financing which are regularly that we think financing in youth is financing in education, financing in vocational training programs. I don't think, and from my experience, that these work anymore. So we need innovative financing, because financing youth isn't charity. It's nation building, right? So the key challenges that me being a youth has faced in accessing finance while accessing education, while trying to be an entrepreneur, while being a social entrepreneur, and also while trying to be empowered and employed enough to provide for my family, is that there is a lack of collateral and credit history in countries like Bangladesh, because we have so little financial literacy, starting from a CXO level to a volunteer level. Someone at the age of 65 who has already retired, you ask them about very simple questions of financial literacy, how they saved and how they invested throughout their time of service, and they would not be able to give you a good answer. That shows how even if people earn, they're not financially literate, and they do not have the necessary knowledge to actually have the best use of the finances. So I really think the lack of collaterals and credit history is one of the challenges that I as an entrepreneur faced while coming to while asking for investments, and also limited financial literacy is one of them. As one of the previous speaker was saying, that gender barrier for young women entrepreneurs. Being a young woman, it already has a lot of gender barriers. Being a young woman in Southeast Asia, and then being a young woman who is not a doctor but an entrepreneur, that's a bigger barrier. So I think gender biasness is there everywhere, even if when you are working with youth, and perception of youth is as a high risk borrowers. And to some extent, I do understand why youth are considered as high-risk borrowers, right? Because there's more uncertainty, but we have to work around that uncertainty. We have to work around building that trust on youth. For example, in Bangladesh, youth has done something tremendous. Youth of the country has stepped down a government which has been we were having a faces government for 15 years. So youth of Bangladesh has done that. So I think it's way not modern and way not smart enough at this age to think that youth are not trustable and youth are not capable. But yeah, if we are high risk borrowers, maybe we are high opportunity borrowers as well. So we need to change that narrative. And also there's a disconnection between education and entrepreneurial skills. So if someone, after finishing their education, for example, me, I studied biotechnology, I worked in biotech labs, and then I wanted to become an entrepreneur, and I had zero knowledge about the entrepreneurial skills. Maybe those are some very interpersonal skills that helped me in the entrepreneurial journey, but why would there be a gap? I think every young person who's pursuing studies should know entrepreneurial skills, because it's not mandatory that if you have entrepreneurial skills, you have to end up being an entrepreneur. But this is something like a very life skill, right? And there are a few very great financing innovations from Bangladesh, which has set an example, not only locally, but globally. I would really talk about iFarmer, and anyone interested here in this room, I would say read about them, because it's a crowd investment or platform that work with youth, they work with agri-entrepreneurs. I thought it's a very worth mentioning innovation, is because this connects all the dots. It uses digital platform. It works with green entrepreneurs, green economy, agri-entrepreneurs, and it works with small investment, crowd investment, where people can actually invest on youth. And this is an example of showing how youth could be trusted and was not gone to failure. My unique findings inside from the field and while working in the healthcare sector for a while, I think I would say all these 5 lines that I have written is from my experience. I don't want donations. I don't want charity. I don't want to be pursued as a charity case to some private organizations or some development organizations. I want my dignity while asking for money, while asking for investment. So funding mechanism must build ownership. We should not be felt like someone is giving me money to do something good for the world. That's not how it works. Financial tools must match local realities. So I'm not someone coming from the capital city of the country. I lived in a suburban area my whole life. And there's a huge gap between the opportunities, the needs, the informations and knowledge of financial tools in between the cities. So I really think the financial tools needs to be matched and convenient for local realities, because for example, where I am sitting right now, it's storming outside. So what about a very altered financial tools for areas which are climate vulnerable? How would it be same as the capital city, where climate vulnerability is comparatively less? So it should be altered. It should be personalized financial tools for youth from different areas, even between a country. Trust building and mentorship is a very big part, a very big role. mentorship has to play in trust building. It's a valuable capital, as the previous speaker has mentioned. So I really think mentors, they're not only here to hear about our problems and give us solutions or connect us with a bigger network. Mentors should endorse the youth entrepreneurs. Mentors should endorse the youth who are looking for opportunities, asking for opportunities, doing something for the society, because that's how you actually build trust while working in something which involves multi-stakeholders. Entrepreneurial networks actually help reduce dropout rates or fund. This is something I think as a consultant for United Nations Development Program currently in Bangladesh, I always speak on top of my lungs that entrepreneurial networks should be facilitated. Being an organization, big organization which has accessibility from the government level to the root levels, what UN or similar development organizations should do is facilitate networks and connections between entrepreneurs, between youth activists. So there should be a stronger connection, because one activist cannot stand in contrast with other activists. One entrepreneur should not be a competition for the other entrepreneur. It should be all partners together. So I think development organization has a big role to play there. And also digital payment adoption is high in my country, in my experience, was really high, but financial planning is very low. That also, again, goes to the root cause, which is financial literacy is so lost in my country. So I would say for the last, empower youth to make informed decision. So we have to actually promote financial literacy. If it's not embedded in the curriculum that we are studying, maybe we have to start training programs, workshops, which actually provide financial literacy for youth. We have to encourage the saving behavior, and in this current world where consumerism, capitalism is so taken pride of, it's so much promoted, especially consumerism. We really need to go back to 80s and 90s, how our parents and grandparents could save and invest and build their generational wealth that maybe some people were left with. So I really think encouraging saving behavior, promoting minimalism, promoting eco-friendly lifestyle should be encouraged. We need to reduce the dependency on predatory lenders. I think that's very obvious why. Increasing long-term business sustainability. Business sustainability is something, it has a lot of roles to play, from, for example, from starting from the climate to the policy to the country situation to disaster. Everything has a role to play of a business sustainability. So I really think before financing, it needs to be really assessed and have a good evaluation of what can strengthen a long-term business sustainability of any entrepreneur. And another thing is we have to help young people to become investors and not just recipients. So young people would best understand what kind of investment on the other young people would help them. So that is also very necessary. We cannot always be taken as someone who takes money. I think youth-centric financial education, I have already spoken about it. Just one thing is microloan linked education models should be promoted. It's something very much lost in countries like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Nepal, in this region, that we really do not have education model that stands on investment, that stands on microloan linked or any support basis. So that should be promoted as well. That's pretty much it. Last call to action. I would end with to policymakers to make youth-friendly regulations and start policies. We need to have more dialogues on policies which are not really supportive of young entrepreneurs in these countries. For example, in my country, there is no term as social entrepreneur in policies. So if someone is an entrepreneur but really giving a big impact on any societal problem, you still have to pay a very high amount of tax like a big multinational company. I really think that's very not youth friendly, not entrepreneurship friendly, and not a social justice friendly situation. So the policymakers should really include youth while making policy in the whole process and design policies for youth, including them. To financial institutions, youth credit schemes, literacy programs are very important. It's not only for financial education institutions, but also for development institutions. To youth, we need to learn how to pitch, plan, protect our own finances. No one will help us with it. And for NGOs and UN bodies, which I think a lot of people here are present right now, we have to center youth voices in designing financial tools. We have to center youth voices while designing any development program or project. So there should be youth focals of every project, of every solution mapping, because that's how we can ensure that nothing for you. Hello? Yeah, that's how we can ensure that nothing for youth is without youth. Lastly, I would really say the future doesn't need savings, but it needs investing on us, on young people, on our ideas, and on our ability to lead. So thank you, everyone. That's all from me. My name is Tanzi again. I am a youth engagement officer, and I really hope it was a very fast because it's storming outside. I need to rush out of the house. But I really hope I could shed light on what a young woman entrepreneur in Bangladesh goes through, faces, and feels. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanzi, for this amazing presentation and for sharing with us the context in Bangladesh. We have heard the context in Uganda, and now the context is Bangladesh, showing the diversity of the region covered. Now we will have the next presenter is Maria Caterina Migliorero, who is an economic affairs officer and sustainable finance lead at UNDESA. She will, in 8 minutes, present to us her recommendation and best practices. Maria Caterina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nikita. I had turned on my video and I saw myself upside down, so I got slightly worried, but I managed to turn it back. Thank you so much, Nikita, for your leadership and energy in making this happen, and my sincere thanks also to all the other wonderful organizers for bringing us together today for this most important conversation. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone joining us. I was really happy when I heard this was happening, on the margins of FFD4. And yeah, thanks for having me. As Tanzi was mentioning just a few minutes ago, a lot has been already said by a wonderful panelists, including herself. So I'm a big believer in listening to each other in these kind of panels. This is how we start a dialogue, and it needs to start with us young people, not to just deliver very long speeches that everyone gets really bored listening to. So I'll try to do just that. I was planning to offer first some reflections from my work at UNDESA in servicing the FFD4 negotiations. So I'll try to do that very quickly. And then I'm happy to delve into my own experience. I was working in impact investment and blended finance based in Kenya for a while, and investing in off-grid solar clean energy solutions across Africa and Asia. I want to say before I start, due to the sensitivity of the process we're currently undergoing, all the views that I'm expressing here today will be my own. So as I was saying, just allow me very quickly to reconnect us to FFD4 with the big picture, and then delving a bit more micro. So as the youth ASG reminded us earlier, FFD4 has two major goals. First, reforming the international financial architecture and delivering a large-scale SDG investment push. So we really, have heard from member states, from co-facilitators, that we cannot build the right enabling environments for finance without these two goals being achieved. But there is also a strong belief from everyone that these goals are very much complementary and come together with building resilience locally. So I heard panelists say we need to tackle both demand side and supply side sides of the equation. it's not an either or choice. Really, both of them need to come together in terms of having global policy reforms and local action to really move the needle. We've heard also other panelists emphasize in that the importance of blended finance and how it can really fund youth. So I really want to echo that. I want to remind everyone, what is blended finance? Sometimes we hear a lot about it, but we, it may be a bit technical. So at its simplest form, blended finance emerged from the previous agenda before FFD4 at FFD3 in Addis. It really gained momentum there as a way to catalyze, to really mobilize private capital for the SDGs by using public funds to share the risks, right? So what we see locally is that there is a mismatch, a risk-return mismatch for private capital for certain types of investments, certain types of geographies, where private capital wouldn't just go on its own. So there needs to be, public finance focused on public goods that can risk share and share some of those risks. The goal, and my colleagues were reminding it, Tansi was reminding it just a few minutes ago, the goal very long term and in an ideal world would be for finance to flow on its own. It would be for it to reach this geography on its own and to really increase long-term business sustainability. So if we have perhaps my last word on FFD4, if we have a look at how the private chapter is constructed, because we at FFD4 have, or in the FFD4 first draft outcome document, we have 7 chapters that span all the different flows of finance from the public to the private. I'm personally involved more so in the private chapter with private flows, and this is how I guess the invitation came about today as well. So if we look at the private chapter, there is a realization that it's built in really 3 different buckets of areas. It starts from building strong enabling environments, strong local enabling environments. It goes into how we can use channel more foreign direct investment, and then it goes into building long-term business sustainability. So it's really 3 building blocks of an approach that needs to come all together. We need to first have local strong capital markets for FDI to flow, and then in the long run we hope that business will be sustainable and will really value non-financial metrics as much as it values financial ones. So on finishing on blended finance, to say 3 core priorities were put out by the co-facilitators on this specific agenda that came out of Addis and wants to be reinforced at FFD4. The first is that we need blended finance to scale. Our colleagues were reminding it, there was a big narrative coming out of Addis that was from billions to trillions. It didn't happen, right? Spoiler alert. So we needed to become simpler, become faster, more standardized. There's a lot of projects going on right now. I know Convergence is building one, and other actors that are really trying to make it scale by making sure that deals are not too bespoke or taking months to arrange. That really can prevent the efficiency of blended finance. Beyond that, I was saying moving beyond the billions to trillion narrative. So volumes are important, but we also need impact, actually. And this is really a red thread of the first draft of the outcome for FFD4. Mobilizing large sum of money is important, but it needs to really focus on delivering real impact. It's not just about the money, it's what it can achieve on the ground. And then finally, a key aspect that I want to focus on today is making sure that blended finance is anchored in local economies. And really, as I was saying, building the local ecosystems first, strengthening capital markets, addressing currency risks, and the like. So let me go on this third point and to share a bit of my own experiences as well, to really reconnect, why these things are happening at FFD4 and how they really are connected with the realities on the ground. And again, my colleagues have done a great job at already prefacing all of this, so I'll try to be quite quick on this and going maybe more so on the solution. So one of the things that we do see a lot is that blended finance right now in the discussions, we often focus on how to really bring in large sums of foreign direct investment, foreign money to bring scale to a lot of the countries that need this type of investment. But we should remember that this is first and foremost also to really fund local businesses, and this is a key theme I've heard throughout the call today. So what does this mean? It means targeting youth, it means targeting women, it means targeting local leaders and entrepreneurs. So all of these, as my colleagues have reminded, are intersectional problems. So they really, feed into each other and reinforce and worsen each other most of the time. So this means creating the right pipelines locally, making sure that we target those populations. Often these populations are either, building businesses that are, too small for large institutional investors to fund them. So, or at times too big. So we really see that there's a missing middle, especially for, the type of business, the startups and SMEs that youth are often involved with, and that desperately need that funding. So we often hear, local leaders say we need funding, and this is what it means. It means finding the right ticket sizes at the right level for the right people. So what are the solutions here? One of the things that in my own experience, once again, working in blended finance and debt impact asset management for energy access in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia, one of the key frameworks I saw emerging, what I thought were interesting to mention in today's call, was gender lens and child lens investing. So what we did at the time, we were launching a 500 million clean energy access fund. And in practice, we wanted this fund to be, focused on infrastructure, which it was, because it was going to invest in solar energy. But we also wanted it to really target women and youth locally. So what we did is that we built a gender lens on that fund. We made sure that that fund was really going to target women, still investing in infrastructure, by making sure we would really sit down with my, at the time, investment manager and look at the list of companies we were going to invest into. Then I made a research. I said, okay, all of these are, effectively led by women. These are not. What is our percentage of the portfolio that is going to be led by women? Can we be more intentional in targeting those women, and especially young women? We're looking at age, and we were looking at also the fact that they're local, so really local leaders. So we were looking at all these different criteria thanks to this gender lens. So this is one of the things that I think has really, is a great way to also be mindful of these topics of gender, of youth, really building a lens upon any fund. And this is a strategy that can be used by any investor, because it can be overlaid to more traditional funds as well. So it could be potentially used by institutional investors. So I think, and again, this is my personal view, this is something that shows promise. And I actually am looking forward to seeing, a side event at the 54 on this specific aspect on child and gender lens investing. So one of the other things that we can do is beyond, trying to target these businesses. One of the things I was saying, we were trying to look at the pipeline and look at the list of women and young women businesses, but we quickly saw that we were missing, like that they weren't enough, right? We just didn't have enough, and then unfortunately, despite our best efforts, we couldn't, even looking online and everything, we couldn't find the right fit for our funds to fund. But we knew this was an objective, so what to do? So one of the other things that we ended up doing is to build a technical assistance facility on top of our fund. So we knew that we had this gender lens and we wanted to operationalize it. So what we did is make sure that this technical assistance facility also had a gender lens, so that it was, making sure that it would fund and scale young women's leaders, businesses, and projects. So we were really targeting these types of project, making sure that it was going to look at youth-led MSMEs in climate, agriculture, etc., and then really help them build the right investment case and financial model. So it was really going with them, with an advisory business, to try to help them build their businesses. And then finally, maybe to conclude my spiel here, which I said was going to be short, is two quickly other things. One other thing that I see locally that I think shows great promise is aggregators. So another solution to the problem I was mentioning in terms of ticket sizes. Women have and young women have smaller ticket sizes usually, where they have smaller businesses, so they don't require that much money or as much money as bigger ones. And unfortunately, even local impact investors can sometimes not cater to those needs. So what I saw happening as well on the ground, which I thought was very interesting, were aggregator platforms, which were bringing together all these smaller businesses from youth and women, and they were making sure to aggregate them to become more appetizing and investable for investors. So I thought that was also an innovation worth mentioning today. And then let me finish by saying that I don't believe youth should just be beneficiaries of finance, but I think the colleagues have reminded, I think they should also be part of the governance, and we should institutionalize youth voices. So this is why I'm so happy this call is happening today. But at every level, perhaps having young people on the board of climate funds could be a way, and so on and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the results of this conversation, seeing how we can bring it forward to FFD4, and seeing all the great things we can achieve together. Thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Maria Caterina, for this amazing presentation. She has been very humble, and I forgot to mention that she played a pivotal role in the upcoming 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. And before joining the UN, she spent 7 years in the private sector, where she worked with debt impact investor in Kenya too, and blended finance. So now we will move to another speaker, who is Patricia Longwani, a Zambian national. She's a climate policy specialist and dedicated youth advocate with over 8 years of experience in climate education and international youth engagement. She's a finance professional, and today she's the representative of Yongo, the official children and youth constituency of the UNFCCC. Patricia, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Nikita. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to this very relevant consultation. I'm honored to be here. As Nikita mentioned, I am the co-contact point of the Finance and Markets Working Group of Yongo, which is the official children and youth constituency of the UNFCCC. And I think, as Maria just said, I think so many points have already been echoed by the previous speakers, which just shows that we may be divided by, let's say, space, we may be divided by continents and race and all other issues, but we can already see that most of the challenges that we are facing when it comes to accessibility to local finance are the same. Like most of the reasons that have been given and the barriers that are being shared are the same across the board, depending on, regardless of where the speaker comes from, whether they're or not they're speaking from a global north or global south perspective, which is something that I really appreciate. And so my points are going to be mostly related to the climate finance space, which I believe is really, really relevant when it comes to the upcoming FFD4, because first of all, as Maria just mentioned that in the FFD4, there's going to be a need, it's going to be addressing mostly the need for a change and the reform of the international financial architecture, the IFA reform and the MDBs, which is very relevant because in the UNFCCC space, which deals with climate change aspects, there is a Article 2.1c, which is very, very relevant when it comes to attaining development, local development, because the 2.1c's goal is basically to just make sure that we need to make finance flows consistent with low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. And so if we're going to talk about climate finance and local development finance, we cannot talk about it without linking 2.1c of the Paris Agreement to the international financial architecture. So I think that this is really, really relevant for us to know. And just to set scene as well, just for before I give my recommendations, I'm going to share a
Patricia, I don't know if you can hear.
No, I think.
Okay, maybe the network. Yes, while waiting for her, don't hesitate to ask for your questions in the chat. We will reply to them during the Q&A. This is the goal. These are the consultations. We want to hear from you. We want to discuss with you. So don't hesitate to ask your questions.
If I may add, Nakita, while Patricia is trying to get back to the Zoom meeting, we will upload the video recording in our YouTube channel of the Local 2030 Coalition. I added the link in the chat. So for you all to know that this will be uploaded there. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Patricia, maybe if you want, we can move with Bruno while you fix the network, and we come back to you after Bruno, if that works. Okay. So while waiting for Patricia, we will introduce Bruno. And I hope he's here. Yes. So Bruno is a food engineer and passionate advocate for food systems. He co-founded the Food Bank of Bolivia, and he's also an ambassador for the Next Gen Agriculture Impact Network, where he works to engage youth in sustainable agriculture and climate resilience. Bruno, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, for the opportunity to share my insights, especially as a social entrepreneur in a country that has many difficulties in doing so. So I think the best thing, the most noticeable thing I could share with you is the experience we had to go through to be right now a legally established and a sustainable nonprofit foundation, a food bank in that way. So Bolivia is really special when it comes to nonprofits and especially with formal organizations. Around 80% of all commerce and of all businesses are informal, so they don't pay taxes, they aren't really registered anywhere, so it is really difficult when you want to become a legally established, especially for a nonprofit. They put a lot of paywalls, they put a lot of bureaucracy in the middle, and so it was really a challenge. And I think some other countries might share these difficulties and these obstacles when it comes to do your own project. So what we had to do is basically we needed to leverage our opportunities with other organizations. The first one that really helped us out was a university where many of us were studying. So they lended us some premises, some vehicles, while we started our operations informally. While in the meantime, we were preparing everything to do the papers to become a legally established foundation. Another thing is that as a food bank, what we do is we salvage food that would be wasted otherwise for commercial or logistical reasons, but it's still totally safe to eat, to then distribute it to vulnerable populations. So that's what we do. And another obstacle we had is that in Bolivia, there is a tax to donations. So we really couldn't, at the start, approach organizations like food industries, because economically it is best for them to destroy their surplus product than to donate it, because that way they don't have to pay taxes for it. So it's really a backwards logic when it comes to donations and support between different organizations. There are some ways we had to do many other papers to get like a tax exemption. And at the end of the day, we could become legally established, and we could become sustainable, but after many obstacles. And the solutions we had was, and that's the point I was trying to get, is first, it was the international collaboration. So we are the first and only food bank in Bolivia. And as such, we didn't really have much experience with the subject. Thankfully, there is an entity called the Global Food Banking Network. That's the entity that supervises and supports food banks across the world. So they were really pivotal to share their perspectives and to support us, to make our documentation, to even give us some funding to become a legally established foundation and to become sustainable at the end of the day. That's one. The other point is, as youth, we also have this very big tool that is the social networks. And by sharing everything that we were doing with the general public, we could really share the impact we were making. And then the individual people from society wanted to contribute in their own way. So that's something we implemented that was basically individual donations to our organization. And that was something very new even for food banks all around the world. And it really helped us to kind of take our first steps to sustainability. And another thing that the social networks helped us achieve is that we became very recognized in our medium for the work that we were doing. So when the global pandemic started, everyone knew that the Food Bank of Bolivia could make so that food can reach places, can reach the vulnerable populations. So when the pandemic happened, even our local government came into contact with us, asking for our support. And that's when we really exploded and grew exponentially. It was really challenging because we didn't really have the means, but because it was really a global crisis and a very big crisis in our country, every organization came together to find a solution. So food industries gave us the food, some other companies gave us the transportation. We had the system and the logistics to make it happen. And that's how we supported more than 100,000 people on the time of the pandemic with the food distribution. So also what all this recognition came was when the government was started to think and to propose to make changes to this, especially the tax on donations, right? So we all know food waste and food loss is a very big problem. And so the way to address it for our government was to make a new law that was basically to give punishment to the industries and the people that made a lot of food loss and waste, and on the other hand, to give recognitions to the ones that reduce it and to donate their surplus production, etc. So they again approached us to build this law together. It's still in process. It's a very big and bureaucratic process that it's already 2 years in the making, but we hope it will be ending soon. And that's what I can talk about on the local level. Because being sincere, it wasn't easy especially on the conditions in our country. And we also had to take all the opportunities we could of funding and on grants and contests with worldwide programs like the World Food Forum and UNDP's Youth for Climate and many others that are open to pretty much every organization worldwide that is youth-led and is addressing climatic problems and social problems. So if I can leave some points, are one, to take advantage of the social networks and the reach it can have, not only with the general public, but also with local governments. And the impact it can make is really big, is really huge. Another one is to approach the general public, because when there are no such thing as access to financing in the local level, maybe the individual people can be the one that can support your ideas and can support the progress and can support the change. And as the last point is to really inspire yourself and support each other with organizations and initiatives that are similar to yours. So in my case, the Global Food Banking Network and food banks all across the world. But when it comes to these social and environmental initiatives, there are countless all around the world that are really innovative and are really making a change. And when you can apply them to your local contexts and with the support of the people that started it, well, it can really work out. So that's just my my experience. I hope it was somehow useful, and thank you so much again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Bruno, for your amazing speech and for emphasizing collaboration again. And I want to say that sentence again, let's set our egos and logos aside to collaborate together. Okay, so now we are back with Patricia, who fixed her network issues. So Patricia, if you can hear me, the floor is yours.
Hi, Nakita. Hi, everyone. Sorry, my apologies. I didn't even notice that you lost me. But yeah, so I'm just going to pick up from where I left off. Nakita told me you lost me at the very beginning. So I was just saying that I'm going to be sharing some views, especially linked to the climate finance aspect, because we believe that climate finance is direct, like the outcomes of the FFT4 would be feeding directly into the climate finance negotiations within the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And just last year at COP29, there was some negotiations on the NCQG, which was the new collective quantified goal on climate finance, which according to many stakeholders, especially from the global south, found it to be the outcome to be disappointing, because many of the climate finance needs and the quantum that was being discussed was way below half of what was being expected from them. And so we are a long way away from attaining any of the goals of the Paris Agreement or even the SDGs if we do not recognize the need for an IFA reform. And I think most of the speakers that have gone before me have emphasized the need for an international financial architecture and multilateral development bank reform, because we cannot talk about climate change and the disproportionate impacts it has had on youths, especially in local communities, without talking about the need for the finance that is needed to actually mitigate, to adapt, and to address the losses and the damages that have been incurred by these communities. And so, firstly, I'm just going to share and re-emphasize what the role and why it's important for youths to be not just involved in localizing finance, but rather to be at the epicenter of this localization of climate finance, especially in this context. Because first of all, youths they are the time-bound stakeholders when it comes to climate finance, the youths and the children. And we have, I think, proven from time immemorial that we understand the urgency to address the climate crisis, to address and achieve the SDGs. We have proven with our actions, with our innovations, with our ideas that we are in deep understanding of the fact that we are time-bound stakeholders, which means that the children and the youth have the highest stakes when it comes to the long-term effects of how finance is actually being used and allocated today, which is the main reason why we should be at the epicenter of the processes that involve localizing this climate finance. And also, we need to acknowledge that finance is local. So climate finance is local finance. For example, when it comes to the role of adaptation, so 70% as of 2023, to 70% of climate adaptation has been happening locally. And so across the global south and the global north, it's in local communities and it is implemented majority by the youths. But ironically, on less than 10% of global climate finance or adaptation finance actually reaches this local level. So you see the disconnect between the people that are actually implementing these adaptation initiatives in these communities and the finance that is reaching the very people that are implementing these initiatives. So this is the bridge that we need to, this is the gap that we need to bridge by making sure that youths are at the center of the whole process, the decision-making process of localizing climate finance, if we're going to actually attain the SDGs. Another thing that I would like to emphasize is that we need to be at the center, not just in the sidelines of localizing climate finance, because of the innovation track record that we have as youths. And I think from climate smart agriculture to just green fintech solutions, I think it's very clear that youths are already co-creating localized pathways to sustainability, which is why we have proven ourselves time and again that we do actually have what it takes to be at the table, to make the decisions, and also to be in the forefront of implementing. And I think I have one recommendation, and this is a personal recommendation, just in addition to all the recommendations that I'm going to share afterwards. It's the fact that I think we need to reduce, and maybe we shouldn't keep centering the conversations on youth potential, because everyone in many different spaces, be it party, be it non-party stakeholders, private sector, public sector, we're always talking about the potential that youths have to, let's say, for climate action, for local development, for innovation. But I'm a little bit against the usage, the over usage of the word potential when it comes to anything that has to do with youth or even children. Why? Because in this context, when we say potential, we're referring to a perceived future capacity of young people to contribute to the attainment of SDGs or even to climate action or innovation. So it's often framed as something that still needs to be realized. When we say youth have the potential, we're saying that this potential needs to be developed, it needs to be unlocked, and hence we are implying that the youths are not yet ready. When we use these statements, we are saying we are not yet ready and that our value lies in what we might achieve someday in the either near or distant future. And when we say this, we are kind of forgetting the real impact. We are taking the focus away from the real impact and the present contributions, the leadership, and the impacts that we are already making as youths. So when we keep referring to ourselves as the potential carriers rather than the change makers, the leaders, and the implementers, we're kind of taking the forward-looking approach, which in practice can become a very convenient excuse for delayed, for underfundment, and even for exclusion, because we are making room for us to not be the immediate recipients of this finance, the immediate implementers. So I think my very forward recommendation would be for us to shift the conversation, and stop talking about the potential that we have to deliver. The focus must shift from imagining what we could do to enabling what we are already doing by making finance accessible to us as youths. Yes, and so I'm going to give some more recommendations now from the Yango's Finance and Markets Working Group. We worked in collaboration with the Yango Food and Agriculture Working Group. And I'm going to tie the recommendations to the majority barriers that are being faced when it comes to accessing climate finance in the global south, especially, but some of them actually apply to youths in the global north as well. So most of these barriers have already been, again, echoed by the previous speakers that spoke. And so it again is a testament of how we really do need to make sure that there is a change in the international financial architecture if we're going to change the narrative when it comes to the accessibility of climate finance or any kinds of financing for SDGs if we're going to attain the SDGs by 2030. So here Firstly, the barrier that we're going to give some suggested best practices that we have observed within our networks is the barrier of bureaucratic processes. And this is, I think, is both a systemic and a structural barrier, because most of the applications to grants, the applications, let's say, to most of the climate finance that exists is very, very bureaucratic. The process is not youth-friendly or user-friendly because it's tailored already towards like big organizations, already registered NGOs. And so the process is very complex, it's time-consuming, and it usually requires legal registration, audited financials, or co-financing, which most of the youth organizations, especially in local communities, they lack that. And so if we're going to make sure that we are bridging this gap or this barrier that stops youth from accessing climate finance, we would need to make sure that the bureaucratic processes of accessing this finance or applying for it are not as complex and time consuming as they currently are. And one example that we would give is the ISLA program. It is a little bit on a small scale, but it's an initiative by the German government which supports, it stands for, it's an abbreviation, ISLA, which is the International Support for Local Communities. And the ISLA project has a very good example of how it is very youth-friendly. It is tailored towards youth. They fund youth to, let's say, attend SPs, to attend COPs, and also they also give micro grants to the local communities and the organizations that they select on ground for them to implement their projects. And so that is one best practice that we would recommend, to say it's very impactful. You can actually track how the funds were used by the local communities, and they didn't have to go through a very time-consuming and very technical and complex bureaucratic process in attaining this micro grant. So this is one best practice that we would recommend that we can see more of when it comes to accessing climate finance. And also the over centralization of funding flows. So again, climate finance rarely reaches substantial and subnational local levels where most of the youths are actually active. From the example I gave, when it comes to, for example, adaptation in the global north and global south, which is carried out more than 70% by local communities, most of the funding flows are so centralized that it is almost inaccessible to the very local grassroots communities. And so it would be important to find a balance between centralization and decentralization while still keeping and upholding the principles of transparency and accountability. So one example we'd give here is especially the Zambian government. So in Zambia, what they have done is that they have decentralized the funding processes through the CDF, so the community, through creating the community development funds. And these funding flows are managed completely by the chiefs or the local governments, by the people that are really on the ground with these people. I think Marco from World Bank mentioned an example about how it is really important to actually get the local communities involved in this project. And this is what Zambia is trying to do through their CDF project. And we have seen actually a rise of accessibility to this development, climate finance, the local development and innovation and climate finance money, because most of the rural youths, most of the women, the people that are in local communities that are mostly at the front lines of implementing these projects actually have access, because the flow of the finance is localized. So the local leaders are actually involved in the dissemination and allocation of these funds while still remaining accountable, of course, so that we have a transparency framework. Another challenge that has been faced in terms of accessing climate finance, that we can give an example of some best practices, is in terms of capacity. So again, there has been a lot of capacity gaps when it comes to especially even the institutions themselves on ground, because they're the ones that in turn have to communicate the information to the would-be recipients, the local communities, the youths themselves. And so when there isn't enough capacity building for them to understand the financial literacy, to know what exactly is a budget, when they say attach a budget, for example, when you're applying to a fund or a grant. So there's low financial literacy among youths in these communities, and many of them lack training in financial management, investment pitching. For some of them, you need to do a pitch. And so the capacity building sessions that have been created in many different, let's say, innovation hubs, accelerator innovation hubs in communities such as Kenya, in Nigeria, and Zambia. So in Kenya, it's called the iHub. In Nigeria, it's called the CC Hub, and in Zambia, it's called the Bongo Hive. So these are increasingly useful innovation hubs that have been created across Africa in 3 countries for now, that have proven to be very helpful when it comes to building capacity of local youths, when it comes to and preparing them to access this climate finance and be able to just implement their projects and be accountable also to the funders themselves. Another recommendation that we would give, especially when it comes to climate finance and local entrepreneurship, is the need, especially for FFT4, because like I mentioned before, FFT4 is definitely going to touch upon the international financial architecture and the need for it to be reformed. And we also would like to just echo and highlight that there is a very big urgency when it comes to aligning the 2.1C of the Paris Agreement. So the 2.1C just talks about the need to make finance flows consistent with low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. So this is the Financing for Development conference, which we know would fit directly into how or how not we are going to achieve the goals of the 2.1C. So it's critical that financial flows support climate resilience low greenhouse gas emissions. And these finance flows should be grant-based. They should not be debt-inducing mechanisms, because again brings us back to why we need the IFA to be reformed, like the international financial architecture, because so far the systems are highly inconcessional. We need concessional financial mechanisms. It needs to be predictable finance, which is additional, accessible, and also not just existing finance being rebranded as something new, because there needs to be additionality of the finance that is in circulation if we're going to address the current debt burdens, especially for sectors such as adaptation, mitigation, just transition, and addressing losses and damages. And so youth-led projects in these spaces need to be funded. But on top of just funding, we need for this finance to respect the rules of intergenerational equity and a just transition. From the food and agriculture perspective, we would like to recommend the use of tools such as true cost accounting in estimating and assessing how, for example, climate finance in food systems, to be specific, can simultaneously benefit areas of the SDGs themselves, especially when it comes, let's say, biodiversity, water, human and animal health, welfare. So using such true cost accounting methods when it comes to climate finance would really broaden the spectrum for that we use, for example, to understand what are the best practices that are being used and how we can be more accountable of our finance that is in circulation. So it's not just about needing to have more money in circulation when it comes to financing for SDGs or climate finance itself, but rather what is this finance going, what are the target implemented areas that this finance has, because when we use true cost accounting, we're not just focusing on the exact one sub-theme that the finance was used for, but it cuts across different sectors and assesses how exactly this touched upon biodiversity, health, and different sectors as well. So this is a recommendation that we would give. And another recommendation that we would give is to have a clear definition and a clear distinction between middlemen and third-party financing systems. This was a recommendation actually from someone from Kenya, because they say that the major barriers that they are facing in their communities, especially as small-scale farmers, is that they do not see the benefit or the value of the crops that they even produce, because most of the value of this agriculture that they're performing on the ground is mostly taken by the middlemen and the third party finances. So it's really important to have a clear transparency framework when it comes to the use of middlemen within communities, because I know we talked about the importance of building capacity within these communities and the institutionalization of this capacity building, but it's also important to make sure that it is still not taking away from the value that is supposed to reach these local communities that are at the front lines of implementing these initiatives, as was the case of Kenya that was shared internally within Yango. And just to summarize, I would like to echo the need for, again, the reformation of the international financial architecture, because the barriers that youth are facing in accessing climate finance are not accidental. They are embedded in an outdated financial system. And so reforming the financial architecture is not just technical, it's the only way that we are going to unlock equitable grant-based accessible finance which aligns and supports the attainment of the SDGs and puts youth at the center of global action. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for this very interesting presentation. So we have 3 speakers left, and then we'll engage in the proper discussion where we will hear from you. We already noted your questions, and we can't wait to discuss with you. So the next speaker I will introduce now is Pragya Devkota, who is the youth advocate from Nepal. She currently serves as the lead of the World Food Forum Nepal's national chapter, where she actively contributes to amplifying youth perspectives in sustainable food systems. Pragya, if you can hear me, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Nakita, for handing over this space to me. I must say this has been a very insightful evening for me. So I have prepared a presentation. Let me share it quickly.
And thank you. Just to precise, if you can be concise in your recommendation, so we have time for the discussion. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you so much. So, hello everyone. Namaste. I am Pragya Devkota from Nepal. Currently, we're associated with the World Food Forum Nepal chapter, and it is my honor to present the reflections on the localization, local youth actions, and the best practices, and some key recommendations from the Nepal chapter as well. So, beginning with the scenario of the Nepal's current investment and the youth landscape, Nepal is a young country with a population of 42.5% is aged from 16 to 40 years. And this demographic dividend offers an opportunity for higher savings, greater investments, and stronger focus on educational and skill development. So recognizing this particular scenario, the government of Nepal has introduced initiatives such as loans based on the educational certificates as collateral, and the various concessional loan programs like loans for the youth self-employment and the project loan for the youth returning migrant workers. And there are some provisions for the startup funds in the national budget aimed at supporting the youth innovations. However, the uptake of these same schemes remains very low because many young people like us perceive that the return on the investment within Nepal is inadequate, and this is contributing to the trends of out-migration. And there are barriers like limited access to the startup capital. There is lack of the structured support systems. So another interesting fact is that Nepal is a country where the remittance contribute 26% of the total GDP. So, but that remittance is not being productively utilized or invested. So these are the certain instances that reveal a critical gap in financing youth-led innovation and entrepreneurship at the local level in Nepal. So it is now the time to invest in youth. So for the youth like us to succeed in leading this very innovation momentum, it is important for us to equip with technological and the financial resources. And it is also vital for us to get connected with the actors of this finance ecosystem, be it the universities, the private sectors, the civil society organizations, and most importantly, the government sector. So we as a National Youth Chapter of World Food Forum, we are strategically working with FAO country office as their youth body, and we are synergizing our advocacy efforts and local actions for finance and other resource mobilization. We believe that creating a multi-stakeholder platforms based on the shared interest is a requirement to optimize the existing limited resources and to build an enabling ecosystem, be it at the policy level, at the institutional level, and most importantly, the grassroots level. So in fact, the World Food Forum youth chapter is envisioned like that. So it is a youth-led, it is a network of partners, and it is envisioned to be a self-sustaining entirety. So Nepal chapter is introducing you about the chapter. It is a national level network that bring young people from the diverse sectors to engage in the meaningful discussions and drive innovations and advocate for the agri-food system transformation mainly, and also for the acceleration of SDGs at the local level. Currently, we have localized in the 7 provinces of the country, and we call them the provincial youth teams, and they collaborate with the local universities, local other organizations with similar motive, and the farmers also. So since our official launch, we have been able to reach out to more than 16,000 young people across the Nepal, sensitizing them about the agri-food system transformation. And last year only, our focus was primarily on youth advocacy. And this year, we want to strategically shift from the advocacy efforts towards the innovation and the project building. So sharing an example of agri-innovation challenge last year, where youth-led startups were provided with the mentorship, they were supported to showcase their innovations from the national to the regional level. Similarly, last year, the Youth Food Lab, which is an initiative of Global Youth Action of World Food Forum, was launched in Nepal, and we are actively looking forward for its establishment process, and which is going on, and we are working on it as a key actor, key stakeholder, and which is expected to be a national level incubation and acceleration hub that prepares the youth to be investment ready. So advocating from the various provincial to national level dialogues for the economic empowerment of youth have been our agenda. And currently, we are working in a climate space where we are organizing a children and youth dialogue. And the main agenda is the climate access of children's and youth-led innovators towards the climate finance ecosystem. Okay, so providing some points on how youth like us and youth organizations like us can contribute. First of all, we should identify the existing innovation gaps in the local governance systems. We can ideate, we can reach out to the local governance body, co-create a project with them and fill those innovation gaps. So that's there is a very important role young people can play. And then the projects that we design should be locally relevant and socially inclusive. We may refer to the various frameworks provided by the government, like national SDG localization guidelines, so that our initiatives can really reflect the local realities. Next, while we can also help building the ground level capacities for the women's, for the girls, and from the gender perspectives, and from other and addressing other kind of disparities that are prevalent in the community levels. And most importantly, we have the creativity, and we should know to creatively tap in and channel the finances from various sources by aligning with the national integrated financing frameworks and that have been introduced to mobilize the resources for the SDG implementation at the ground level. So presenting the key expectations for the conference, looking ahead to the conference, we strongly urge the global commitment to the youth inclusive financial systems that prioritizing that financing mechanisms must recognize young people as implementers, not just recipients. I want to highlight this point once again. And then financing must be designed with young people and for the young people. So next is investing in the youth capacity building. We from be the financial literacy to the financial management, project management should be the priority. Next, what we have felt is there should be the effective linkage of academics and the commercial spaces so that the students studying at the university level, school level can get the market access, the commercial spaces for to showcase their innovations, to sustain their innovations. And also we advocate on integrating the youth-led interventions into the national and local development plans, ensuring their sustainability. Another thing I want to highlight is the creation of localized and simplified financing pathways that should be promoted at the operational level, because too often young people and youth organizations like ours face barriers accessing the international and the national funding because of the very complex procedure. So we need the local funding windows that prioritize the youth-led initiatives and innovations with, for example, the simple application processes, small grants to support the small innovations, and most importantly, the technical support that we need. So concluding, I want to highlight that youth are not just the beneficiaries of the finance, they are the creators of the solutions. And with the right investments, with the policy backing, and with the inclusive financial systems, I think young people from the countries like Nepal, from the global south, can drive the transformative change that are needed to meet the sustainable development goals at the local level. So I want to say that youth are ready, youth are capable, and we just need the systems to believe in us, to invest in us, and to partner with us. So thank you so much for this opportunity. That's it for my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Agia, for this amazing presentation. It was very informative. Now, the next speaker is Safir Alexander, who is the coordinator of Transform Education of UNGEI. Safir, if you can hear me, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nikita. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you all today. I have thoroughly enjoyed the session so far, and I feel like I've learned so much. So I'm really, really grateful to be able to add my voice to this conversation. As Nikita would have mentioned, my name is Sophia Alexander. I'm a young feminist from Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm also the lead at Transform Education. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with TE or Transform Education, it is a coalition of youth-led organizations hosted by UNGAI, which is the United Nations Girls Education Initiative. As I would have mentioned earlier, it is such an honor to be here with you all and to reflect on the localization of development finance, especially coming from my perspective of financing for young feminist-led organizations and movements. As we've all kind of talked about today in our various presentations, local finance is a powerful driver of justice and development. And across the globe, young feminists from our community and other communities around the world are already leading the way. We are building solutions, creating safety, advancing rights, and mobilizing communities. Yet, as is the case for so many of us, this work continues to remain severely underfunded, undervalued, and often excluded from the rooms where the financial decisions are made. So as we look towards FFD4, we have to ask, what's working at the local level, whose voices are being heard, and whose are being left out? That's a really important question. And how do we move beyond symbolic inclusion, that tokenized representation that a lot of my colleagues were talking about earlier, to meaningful participation for young feminist leaders in shaping financial strategies that affect our communities? Because in this era of shrinking fiscal space, one thing is really, really clear. Young feminist organizations are not going anywhere. The work is going to continue. But what we do need now is for local actors, governments, donors, and institutions to step up and show up for us in a renewed way. To be more specific, we need support for organizations like Chefs, which is creating safe spaces for queer youth in West Africa, Gufasha Girls Foundation, working to end child marriage, Empathetic Klima, providing training and education for young women and girls on the front lines of the climate crisis, and for Pratishanti, which is delivering comprehensive sexuality education in schools across India. This is what transformative local finance can achieve and what it should look like, meeting real needs led by the people most affected. Young feminists are already shaping local finance in really, really meaningful ways, from advocating for budget allocations for climate justice and care work, to pushing for sexual and reproductive health rights, to defending LGBTQ+ rights in spaces where it is so dangerous to do so. Young feminists, young activists are not just passive recipients, and I feel like I'm repeating so many of the words that my colleagues have said, but it is so true. We are visionaries and builders. We determine priorities that are often overlooked in mainstream agendas. We ensure that local finance is not only efficient, but rooted in justice, equity, and lived realities. But we also have to be really, really honest about the barriers that young activists and young feminists face. Too often, funding is inaccessible, overly bureaucratic, as the speaker right before me spoke about, or tied to narrow outcomes. Youth-led and feminist organizations are left out of formal decision-making processes, and there's a lack of trust in our leadership and capacity, despite a really strong track record of impact. We don't just need more funding, we also need a power shift. This means flexible, long-term, and core funding for grassroots groups. It means dismantling hierarchies that concentrate financial decision-making in the hands of just a few. And it also means holding institutions accountable to the commitments that they've already made to gender equality and youth inclusion. Let's remember, when young feminists help shape local finance, we create systems that are more progressive, more just, and far more responsive to real community needs. As we head into FFD4, our expectations are abundantly clear. We need to recognize and fund young feminists as key development actors. We have to ensure that the financing, the localized financing that we have is gender transformative. It means that it doesn't just acknowledge that these inequalities exist, but it actively works to dismantle the systems that uphold that said inequality. We need to localize our financial commitments in ways that center marginalized voices, especially those most excluded from the economy. That's women and girls, Indigenous peoples, LGBTQ+ youth, and those in the informal sector. And finally, we have to institutionalize youth leadership. And I'm so glad that so many of my colleagues have emphasized this point before me. Institutionalize youth leadership in financing frameworks through seats at the table, budget lines, and decision-making power, instead of tokenized representation and one-off engagements just to tick that youth box. As the Addis Ababa Action Agenda reminds us, gender equality is a core driver of sustained, inclusive, and equitable economic growth. To close, really simply, local finance is more than a policy issue. It's a justice issue, and young feminists are essential to getting it right. So, as we head to the 4th Forum for the Financial Development, let's invest in young feminist movements and in a more equitable and just future. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Sapphire, for this amazing intervention. So now we move to the last speaker, and this is Kiara Kiai, who is a member of the Hawaii SDG Youth Council. She has sent us a video that will be played with the sound this time, and I will play her recommendation. I hope you can see my screen and hear my voice.
Aloha, kiare kea, no oahu mai au. He umi kumaha o mo makahiki. Hi, I'm Kiara. I'm from the island of Oahu and I'm 14 years old. I'm a member of the SDG Youth Council to Hawaii Green Growth and the Aloha Plus Challenge, a local framework for the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs echo the indigenous knowledge and ancestral intelligence of the islands. Ike that stems from thousands of years of sustainable practices, ideas such as Mauka to Makai, things such as viewing Earth as an island, something that's interconnected, something where things that you do in one place impacts things everywhere. As a member of the Youth Council, I'm able to collaborate on and provide feedback on many different initiatives here in Hawaii. For example, the Care for Aina Now Coalition, which takes legislative approaches to providing funds for climate resiliency. One of their legislative priorities is something called the Environmental Stewardship Fee, which would tax tourists coming to Hawaii and allocate those funds towards climate needs here in the islands. It feeds on the idea of reciprocal relationships. You provide for the land and it provides for you. You manage the land and you take care of it and it nourishes us. This fund would basically fund all the environmental needs here in Hawaii so that As we appreciate the breathtaking views nature has to offer us, we're still making sure that we're preserving that Aina for future generations to enjoy just as much as we do. Other initiatives that I also get to hear about and collaborate on and work towards are things such as the Community Investment Vehicle for the Alawai watershed. In Hawaii, we have things called the Ahupua'a systems, which are land divisions divided up by the amount of natural resources. In these ahupua'a are something called the konohiki, a resource manager, someone who makes sure that we have enough of every natural resource that is needed to sustain ourselves. They're able to place kapu, or taboo, on different natural resources to make sure that we don't run out of that resource if we're running low. This community investment vehicle would serve as a konohiki of sorts for said district. More things are something called the Malama Implementation Tool, which is a tool to help assess different projects and make sure that it's helping and impacting the community in a positive way. An assessment that helps you to think about how your project will benefit the community, how it will impact the community, how you're making sure that you're implementing things that will take care of the Aina and take care of the Lahui. Feeding on that cultural value and island value of Malama to take care, to preserve, to manage. All these initiatives here in Hawaii are locally and culturally appropriate. It takes things and spins it into our island worldview. Something that we grow up with, thinking of as normal, as common things, but things that people in other places might not fully understand if they don't have that way of island system thinking. It's something that I know as an Indigenous youth here in Hawaii, and something that I want to push forward and advocate for, because
I think we've lost the speaker. I can't hear anything.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
I think we have lost the speaker.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
we can.
Nakita, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Some of you are tired. No, now we share the video of the Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Felipe Podier. He has been supporting this consultation, and now everything works well. So if you can, 1 second. Okay, I will just share the screen. Share with you. Okay. So now you should be able to see my screen, and I will launch the video.
Hello everyone, my name is Felipe Polier and I'm the Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs, leading the United Nations Youth Office, an office established by a General Assembly mandate to advance youth affairs. Thank you for joining the road to Seville, the local way, a youth consultation on local financing solutions towards the 4th Financing for Development Conference. I thank Local2030, the World Food Forum, and my team at the United Nations Youth Office for creating and convening this important discussion. It's no secret that today's global context is deeply challenging, marked by compounding crises that include conflicts, gender inequalities, and climate change. The truth is that 5 years from 2030, we are far from delivering on the promises of the Sustainable Development Goals. Young people are particularly affected. Globally, 258 million children and adolescents are out of school. More than 1 in 5 young people are not in education, employment, or training, and young women are particularly affected. Mental health is another serious concern, with suicide being the 4th leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds. To address these and other issues, adequate financing is essential. Financing is the engine that drives development. Yet, the world faces a stark financing divide and shrinking fiscal space. In fact, trillion shortfall in annual investment has never been so large. Despite these challenges, young people are at the front lines of creating positive change. From advocating for social justice and equality to designing innovative solutions for the SDGs, young people are leading the way in every country, city, and village around the world. I truly believe that the smartest decision we can make to address current crises and avoid future ones is to invest in young people. Part of that work includes breaking down the barriers preventing access to finance for young people and youth-led organizations, which directly prevent them from sustaining and scaling their impact. Local and grassroots youth organizations are particularly affected. Beyond financial barriers, young people who are among the most affected by policy decisions are also the most marginalized in decision-making spaces, including discussions on financing priorities. This exclusion reinforces the misconception that youth and their organizations are merely beneficiaries rather than equal partners in driving change. This needs to change. The good news is that with world leaders coming together to take action to deliver an SDG investment push at FFD4 in Seville, we have a unique opportunity to transform this reality. Young people's views, recommendations, and meaningful participation in policy making at all levels must be at the heart of this process. We must seize this window of opportunity and use it to translate commitments into concrete action and tangible impact on people and the planet. You can count on the United Nations Youth Office to be a committed partner in this process. If we work with and for young people, we can build the worlds we envision in the 2030 Agenda. I wish you great discussions ahead and look forward to the outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Felipe Polier, Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs. We appreciate your work and support. So now we will move to the very dynamic part of the meeting, and that is the discussion, where you are able to ask your questions and have replies. So we already received some questions. Feel free to ask more while we will be reading the question we already received till now. So I hope the participants are still there. So the first questions allow me to, okay, the first question is for Marco. Marco Fayed from the World Bank Youth Summit, and it's about what concrete mechanisms are currently in place to facilitate youth access to local financing, particularly in countries of the Global South. Due to time constraint, you will have 1 or 2 minutes to reply. And the second question is for Victor. And the question is, how can we ensure that youth-led local initiatives are not only visible, but also recognized as viable solutions eligible for sustainable action we will be taking? Marco, up to you. Or Victor, you can start first. Okay, no Marco, no Victor. Okay, so we had another question for Bruno Ferreira. I see you are here. And you have mentioned the fact that the government will rather destroy the surplus of production rather than donate it. So one of the question is, can you elaborate it further and what are the solutions you suggest? Thank you. Bruno, up to you.
Of course. So yeah, basically in Bolivia, there is a tax to donations. So if you want to donate your surplus production, talking about a food industry, you need to pay, I don't remember exactly the percentage of the value, but you need to pay to donate. On the other hand, if you destroy your surplus, you don't need to pay any tax. So at the moment of, for us as a food bank, of approaching food industry so they can donate their surplus food to us, they don't want it because economically it's not good for them. They are losing money by paying taxes for those donations. I don't really understand the logic behind it, but what we did is that there is another paperwork that you can do that if you prove you are a nonprofit foundation, a legally established nonprofit foundation, then you can have like a title that's called the tax exemption. So if they donate specifically to you, they don't need to pay taxes. So that's what we had to do. That's what you have to do if you do it like the legal way, so to speak. But it was very time consuming, very money intensive too. It's a very long process. It was like a 2-year long bureaucratic process. But at the end of the day, it's what we had to do, right? On more of a long-term solution, it's what I was talking about, the new law about food waste and food loss prevention. So it's on its way as a new law. It requires a lot of time and discussion. But once that new law is into play, it will make the other one obsolete. But yeah, it's a really backwards logic law. It's really frustrating, but it's what we have to deal with. Thank you. Nakita, you can proceed.
Thank you very much, Bruno. There are many other questions for you, but while waiting, we will now give the floor to Mr. Alvaro Diaz Duque, who is the keynote listener. He's the Deputy Director General for Multilateral and European Development Policies at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the European Union and Cooperation of Spain. He brings an extensive experience in international cooperation with a strong focus on multilateral engagement, development financing, and European partnership. His leadership is instrumental in aligning Spain's development policies with global priorities such as the 2030 Agenda and the financing for development process. Mr. Alvaro Diaz, if you can hear me, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nakita. Thanks a lot. Are you listening to me right?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Hello. Well, I try to be as brief as possible. I believe this was a very interesting, really productive exchange for everyone involved. First of all, I think we really need to make a reflection, and the fact is that is it youth value in itself? It is difficult to say. It's not for me to say, but the fact remains that 60% of the population accounts for youth, for young people. 60%, just before we just reached to 24. If we reach, for instance, to 30, it will be much more. And the thing is that these young people, they are facing extreme difficulties for accessing finance. So in this sense, we would like to establish that our Spanish Cooperation Master Plan between 2024 and 2027 recognizes youth as a central pillar of its sustainable development strategy. And this approach is articulated through various initiatives and principles, but mostly to the triple transition: social, economic, and ecological. And our Spanish Cooperation Master Plan promotes a just transition, highlighting the importation of education, training, and the active participation of young people in building inclusive and sustainable societies. This is also embedded in our cross-cutting principles, as feminist approach is incorporated in all cooperation actions, especially promoting gender equality and human rights, with special attention to children, adolescents, and youth. And of course, we also have an active participation of universities in the design and execution of projects that benefit young people. Now centering in 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, which Spain, as you know, will host in Seville from June 30 to July 3 in 2025. As you are well aware, it aims to approve a new paradigm of development financing to effectively contribute to the achievement of 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. And to secure the approval of this new framework, which must be reflected in ambitious yet realistic final document, it is necessary to build consensus, and a consensus that will be important in areas where developing countries have higher expectations for change and improvement. This includes a reform of international financial architecture, debt sustainability mechanisms, and international tax cooperation. In this field, we need to match ambition with actions. Taken into account the political dimensions of this agenda, mobilization of political will from our country is crucial. And we think that the cost of inaction in terms of global trust, the credibility of the financial system will be huge. Although Financial for Development Conference will be a United Nations event, you can, of course, count on Spain to deploy all authority and energy to build bridges, unlock and mobilize political will, acting as an honest broker to ensure the success of the conference and a positive outcome. And in order to do that, we believe that the preparatory process should be inclusive and all voices should be listened at national, supranational, and superstate levels, but also key actors such as civil society, private sector, and academia. This includes, of course, youth, and this is where we fix this event, which is very, very important. We also know that the 4th International Conference takes place in an especially concerning context due to the challenges facing multilateralism, and overlapping conflicts as a backdrop. We think that the cost of inaction in Seville will be measured in terms of credibility in the multilateral system and global trust, something that's very, very important in our times, especially from the young point of view, as we believe that certain disruptive speeches are unfortunately taking hold in a lot of our societies, especially in Western societies, but also in other parts of the world. And you know what I'm talking about. In order to achieve this, it's necessary to build a consensus on progress and positions to be specified in the various areas of the financing for development area, especially on issues where developing countries have higher expectations for change and improvement. As I said, international financial architecture, debt sustainability mechanism, and international tax cooperation. We expect Seville to adopt a substantive outcome document with concrete actions and clear mandates to continue our reform process for the international financial framework to be fit for purpose. It will also be the space where coalitions of countries and stakeholders ready to move this agenda forward can agree in specific initiatives to deliver transformative change and impact. We believe that the Conference of Seville is not the end of the road, but it should set a roadmap to the future based on a reinforced follow-up mechanism to hold us accountable for our commitments and agreed actions. Now, centering into youth, we believe that FFD4 presents a timely opportunity to elevate youth-centered financing strategies in innovation. And this can be done through different strategies or paths. First of all, as other panelists have said, we believe that the inclusion of youth in policy design and dialogue is vital. And this is also done through youth delegations and panels, but also through consultations, such as the one that's taken right now. And why not, as others have said, the possibility in the future of establishing an advisory body specifically for youth. A second element would be to showcase innovative financing mechanism in the conference. Some of these elements, of course, have already been hinted at, and of course, it includes blended financing models, green and digital job financing, and even, why not, social impact bonds. Also, it is important to have a best practice exchange through showing spotlights in, especially in some areas where we can share local level successes of youth. As for instance, in the environment, in city, in urban environments, but also in country and rural environments. We should also foster a data-driven policy promoting tools that can disaggregate financial data by age in order to track impact and improve targeting. Of course, other elements would include monitoring tools. As we have said, it's important to establish a follow-up mechanism. This, of course, could include dashboards as indicators to track public and private financing flows that can directly benefit youth. Other elements that should be taken into account should be partnerships with technology and innovation funds. And there could be a possibility to encourage tech companies to support open innovation challenges and funding platforms for youth. And another thing, what was very hinted at, but for us, it's the main element would be education. And in this sense, we believe it's important to develop inclusion campaigns, pushing for commitments to improve youth access to financial services. And of course, also youth financial literacy programs, funding scalable models that combine financial education with access to startup capitals and other elements. Of course, the priority aspects more in general from a Spain perspective in the Financing for Development conference should include the defense of multilateralism, the constructive participation in the International Tax Framework Convention, combating illegal financial flows, or the promotion of the chapter of science and technology and development and aid for trade. So I think this more or less should give an element of current thinking, and we evaluate very greatly this kind of initiatives, and we believe that this will also come into a thinking and other events that we're carrying out both internally and externally. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Alvaro, for your time, for your support, for your recommendations. We are very grateful to have you. We are reaching the end. I would like to thank again our partners, the UN Youth Office, the World Bank Youth Summit, the FAO World Food Forum. Thank you so much for joining us, you and Desa, all of you, all the speakers. Thank you so much. We are looking forward to engage with you soon. We will share our mails in the chat. And thank you again. Now I will give back the floor to Lucia, who I also want to thank for her amazing commitment and work in organizing these consultations. Thank
you very much, Nakita. And sorry for not being able to answer all the questions, but as Nakita was mentioning, we will add our emails in the chat so we can continue the discussion from there. And you can also feel free to share some of the recommendations ahead of the elaboration of this report. Thank you very much, Alvaro, and thanks to the Ministry and of course to Spain for being one of the key champions on localization. And I like now to pass the floor to Sebastian, the head of the Local 2030 Secretariat, who will give closing remarks. Thank you very much, and thanks again to all the speakers and all the young people present here today, joining this first ever youth consultation that we've organized. And of course, we'll do something else in terms of youth. This is the first time we do this, but we are very keen to continue working on youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucia, and thanks, Nakita, thanks, Alvaro, also Felipe and his team, Suda, Bianca, for the great organization. the World Food Forum and the World Bank Youth Summit. I've been following closely since the beginning the consultations. It has been so informative, really for me and inspiring. And I guess it was for all of you. I've been following in the chat also the reactions and happy to see that most of you have found it very, very informative. Now the challenge is to take it to the other spaces, to all the persons that were not registered, that were not part of this consultation. And as Alvaro was saying, it's very important to bring these voices to FFD4, to the discussions, and not only claim that we've made a consultation, but really plug these as inputs into the discussions in Seville and beyond. And as such, we will have, Lucia already mentioned it at the beginning, but we are committed as a team and as partners to make a report out of the session, to share it with in different spaces, formal and informal, with the negotiators or lead negotiators of the outcome document and program of action, with the UN entities also that have a key role in preparing Seville, but also with all the allies that the Local2030 Coalition is bringing together. As you know, youth is one of our 5 constituencies. We also have national governments, local and regional governments, academia, civil society organizations, and private sector. And it has been mentioned in one of the interventions that enabling connections between all these actors within local ecosystems, but also at global level, is critical. And this is our role as a coalition. So be sure that we will bring these voices through different forms to the fora that we are attending, that we are acting as a bridge between you and these processes for Seville and FFD4 and beyond. And I just want also to reflect that this is a key contribution, as was said, to the broader reforming of the international financing architecture, because it's not only about claiming that it's important for youth to have access to finance, but it's also making it part of the financing system, like making it embedding this better access into the existing systems, and not only act on a one-off or project-based approach, or to make it, as many of you said, a philanthropic thing, but rather to make it a systemic approach of youth inclusion. And I would end with this, like you've been talking a lot about doors and barriers, so removing barriers, opening doors, and this is all that the different partners that I mentioned are committed to do, and we need to keep pushing, because it's not about making things right, but it is about enabling the transformation that we all want for sustainable development. And youth, as you said, are key players in this, not only implementers, not only beneficiaries, but really at the forefront of the transformation that we all want to build a better world. So thank you again to all of you for participating. We will continue liaising with you and keeping you posted on next steps. We will also, before Seville, we will share the report with you. We will share it also widely within our constituencies. We will continue engaging with you also on a number of issues before Seville, but afterwards we want to keep the ball rolling and see how we can make it a modality of youth engagement, or contributing to facilitate youth engagement together with the partners we've mentioned, including UN Youth and the World Food Forum and the World Bank Youth Summit, to continue making your voice heard in global fora and in global processes. So count on us for this, and thank you again for your participation. Thank you, Lucia, Nakita, Bianca, all of you made it possible, and you are representing in our organizations what the youth are capable to do when they are empowered. So we are all very proud of you and looking forward to continue engaging with all of you. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and thank you all again. We look forward to keeping in touch. Have a good evening, afternoon, morning, depending on where you are. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you.